I'm very happy this afternoon.
He's going to start talking.
Okay, so welcome everybody. I'm very happy to introduce today's speaker, Sara Goldrick-Rab. Sara has transcended her inadequate education and become, kidding, she's a very distinguished Penn sociology major. Did very well here and exceeded it. Sara built an enormous reputation for herself, both within the profession, nationally, for her work on the practical sociology of education, especially higher education in the United States. She got tenure at Wisconsin. She left behind. You've left behind the Hope Lab there, right?
I can explain that.
Yeah. We'll talk about that. But just so I don't miss on the main point, Sara is now back in Philadelphia. She's professor of what is higher education policy and sociology at Temple. Again, we're going to let her speak, but the point I want to make is that Sara is a very rare person in academia in the sense that she has both excelled in the academic setting. Her papers appear in the best journals in sociology and education policy. But even though most people, I'm just going to be frank here, just write a bunch of drivel at the end of their papers about the policy implications of surgeons and so-and-so, well, you might as well be writing about the weather. But Sara, on the other hand, has actually figured out how to engage, like I said, a serious national audience around some serious questions. And if you listen to Sara, if you study her career, if you look at her website, you will see something that is on the one hand rare, but on the other hand feasible, and it ought to be inspirational to all of us. So, Sara, as you know, I really admire everything you've been able to do because you're dealing with some real things in a very serious manner. So welcome back. Thank you.
Okay, that's that's too kind. Okay, look, I was the girl who came here in 1999 and didn't know what demography was. So I was in the sociology program, and my friend Jen Hikus was like brilliant, and she said, I'm doing this thing called demography. And I was like, what's that? She's like, there's more money in it. It's very exciting. And I'm like, but I don't know what it is. So I think I exited the program never having been to this brown bag. So I had to be honest that this is like not just the first time I've spoken here, it might be one of the first times I attended it, which is really cool and really, really nice. The other thing I want to be honest with you about is like most of academia, not just sociology, has this problem, right, with applying the work. And to the students, I want you to know that I struggled while I was here with these issues. I had some amazing advisors who were very committed to using their work. People like Doug Massey were here, Kathy Eden helped train me, Paula England, right? People who do, and Jerry Jacobs was my main guy. And I watched, for example, as Janice did things to actually affect, the legal situation for folks. But when it came time for my dissertation, I did write a policy chapter, and it was removed. Okay, so that was a moment because I was going off not to a regular academic position at Wisconsin. I didn't want to be an academic. I didn't want to be because I wanted to do stuff in a certain way, in a very applied way. But I was convinced by Wisconsin that the position I took in education there was going to give me a very good chance to do both academic and more applied work. Okay, so that's the kind of job I took, and like Herb said, I was there for 12 years. I got a lot of opportunity to also advise in sociology. Some of my top students came out of the sociology department, people like Catherine Broughton, who's now at Iowa, and Lauren Schutte, who's at UT Austin. While I was in the last couple years that I was there, I did create something called the Wisconsin Hope Lab. And I did that actually very much inspired by Penn because I grew up around the tanks. Right? The Frank tank, is it gone? I don't know, right? There was the Frank tank, and Doug had a tank of people, right? And there were like these collections of research together, right? With students working together. And I saw that, and I had a bunch of projects, and I kind of just wanted to bring them together, right? So coherence and a particular agenda was not the original part. This was more like, I kept saying to people, it's like I'm a chemist, right? And this is like my bench of projects. I left Wisconsin because of former Governor Scott Walker. Very happy to say that. I am literally a political refugee. There is only one reason I left, and that's the reason. And when I was leaving, I thought, okay, if I'm gonna have an Act 2 in academia, I'm gonna make a really conscious choice this time about making sure the institution I go to really embraces really applied work, right? And I go with the dean who really commits to that. I knew I was already coming in as a full professor with tenure, so I knew that I could have some opportunities, but institutional match is a thing. And I miss Philadelphia tremendously. I think this is an awesome place to do applied research, and I'm gonna give you a bunch of reasons as to why. But I chose Temple very consciously because Temple is really known and has been known for a long time as a place that really is intent on serving this city. And I thought the kind of work that I did aligned really well with that. I also want to admit that while I was here being advised by Penn faculty, I was also being advised by Temple faculty. So when I didn't have something I needed here, I would travel up to Temple, and Kate Shaw, who used to be there, would advise me. I now occupy Kate Shaw's former office. Okay, so I also encourage you to think broadly, right? The internet has changed things. You can think about having advisors in multiple places. And one of the reasons I was so excited for this invitation is I would hope that you of Philadelphia here at Penn would think about the rest of us faculty in the area as resources to you too, because I know I got a lot out of that. Okay, so the Hope Center, which I'm going to tell you a little bit about today as I tell you about this main center of my research right now, was created very differently than the Hope Lab. This is not the Sarah show, okay? This is not just my set of projects. This is a center that I've created very intentionally to have a particular agenda. It has what I would call research campaigns, okay? And I'm gonna give you a sense of that in a moment. And it is a lot more than just me. So we have been hiring lots of people. We have a bunch of openings right now, I should mention. A third of our work are PhDs doing research. A third of our work are practitioners who do not have PhDs, and that's the point. They're experts in their own fields. And a third of our team are comms people, communications folks, right? And I'll explain later why that's all necessary, but I want you to think about that. I designed this talk to give you a bit of an overview of this really important topic, why it matters so much to us, what we think we know right now, and because I know that you're really capable of helping and engaging on this, also what we don't know. And I want to be really upfront with that. My training here taught me that we never know what we think we know, and there's not as much certainty as we would like to have. But my training since has told me that I also need to sometimes just say what common sense would tell us, right? So I'm going to give you both the balance. And I'm also in the midst of that going to kind of show you how we do the work, because this is not a research agenda aimed first and foremost at creating academic publications. Okay? The Carnegie Corporation has told me I have to write a book. I have a fellowship to write a book. I don't want to write a book because the book, unless I can be assured that the book will help drive change, I'm more interested in doing the kinds of white papers and the reports that we do tend to do. And I want to let you know that one of those reports was just released and is on our website, and it's this topic, but only about Philadelphia. And tomorrow at Saxby's headquarters, we're convening 50 of the biggest leaders in this city to address these exact issues. And they're only there because we created the research evidence that led them to believe that they should engage in the topic, right? So it's very timely to be here today. Okay, so first I want to ground this in the big picture, right? We're concerned about inequality broadly. I am fascinated about the extent to which higher education is posited as a solution to inequality, much as education long has been, despite the evidence that education creates as much inequality as it seems to ameliorate, right? And higher education for a long time has been thought to be part of the solution to inequality, but over the last 10 years in particular, we've been able to really see how that might not be true, okay? So top line stuff to think about. Enrollment in college is up. It's up across the board, although there might be some slippage in those gains in the last few years. There's some new data coming out. Second, completion rates are stagnant, okay? Completion rates have been basically stagnant no matter how you measure completion, right? So if we're a community college and we measure transfer, if we are a community college and we look at associate degrees and certificates versus bachelor's degrees, whatever you look at, basically since the 70s, completion rates are fairly steady. There's one way in which we can view that as a good news story, because the compositional changes in higher ed are dramatic, right? So the average test scores of students in higher education have fallen, the average income of students has fallen, the average family background has fallen, right? These are less prepared, more vulnerable people, but completion rates are stagnant. So in one sense, that's a good news story. But there's another reason which this is a bad news story. Because over time, the way we've financed college has shifted. And so when we say non-completion in 2018, it's a different non-completion than we said in 1977. Non-completion in 1977 meant walking away without a degree, right, or credential. But you're not necessarily worse off than you were if you didn't go in the first place. In 2018, what's different? What do you walk away with? Anybody? Debt. Okay. So now you are very likely to have debt and no degree, and it is not entirely clear that that's a better outcome than not having gone to college at all. Okay, that's a really important question that I think more people need to work on unpacking. However, we see a couple of things when we look by, for example, family income. So first, the gains continue to be the greatest as we go up the income spectrum. But also, I want to highlight for you that it's really only the top that's doing well. Okay, for the longest time, we have focused most of our energy on understanding what's happened to the bottom in terms of educational attainment, especially on the way to college, right? We talk about the Pell Grant recipients. These are the very poorest people of those in higher ed. We're talking average family income of just under $30,000. So not the 10, right? People with $10,000 in this country are still not going to college at very high rates. But what's really fascinating, if you look at the most recent data that's coming out of the NIPSAS, which is the Nationally Representative Study of College Students, is that today, the middle class, which for my purposes, I'm gonna just include the two middle quintiles, those folks are starting to look like the bottom did in 1990. So that means their prices are up, their college choices have shifted. So for example, the next to bottom quintile is now more likely to enroll in community college. They're being priced out of public universities. And the one just above them, right, not the top 25%, but the quintile just below that, has always thought in their social milieu that they are to go to private schools. And now they're being priced out of those private schools and being pushed to public schools. Okay, so we should expect to see sort of cascading changes as a result. We might not see changes in completion rates for those folks because those parents and those families will they'll do almost anything, right, to preserve their social status, including, putting themselves into financial jeopardy. So we might see other measurable outcomes that would be bad for them, but not necessarily reductions in college attainment. Why do we see these changes, and in particular, why don't we see more students finishing college? It was true when I was here, and it's true now, that if you read the vast majority of the academic literature, you will see the finger pointed primarily at academic under-preparation. Most of the interventions are around things around college remediation, right? People say the test scores are down. We're seeing this big debate at Harvard, right, over whether people are being admitted with not as good test scores and inappropriately. We're still seeing a lot of conversation about high schools that are not preparing students right. The secondary issue that's being raised relates a lot to things that sociologists care about, sort of social and cultural capital. And the main interventions there are things like trying to create more hospitable learning environments for first-generation low-income college students. Right, I saw Annette has a piece in the Almanac I just read about making her classroom more hospitable to those students. Secondarily, there's a lot of work on nudging them, right? Partly out of your behavioral economist here at Penn, right? There's a lot of effort to kind of just give them little supports, to let them know that they fit, and to remind them to do certain things. There are many reasons why other explanations are less common. And one of those reasons is that other things are not measured in the data sets. This is really notable, okay? For the last 30 years and going on 40 years, the federal government has asked a certain set of questions in their studies, which then everybody kind of looks to figure out what matters most, okay? And the issues that I'm gonna raise today are not in those data sets. So we all know what this can do, right? If you don't measure certain things, other things will look like they're important and you'll have no discussion about the rest. There have been pieces written about this issue going back to the 90s about how money matters way more than we're measuring. but we haven't gone even just beyond issues of money and financial aid. So I'm going to say that the overlooked culprits are challenges with life logistics and finances, and I encapsulate all of those in what my book, Paying the Price, calls the new economics of college. So the new economics of college, just briefly, go to issues not only of tuition, they go to issues of rent, the price of food, right, the declining value of financial aid, the changes in the pocketbooks of regular families. Think about the families of people who go to college today, right? They are not the wealthy of the past. If a student says, hey dad, I'm short 250 bucks, they're far more likely to be greeted with, really sorry, I don't have it, right? Very different things there. The new economics of college also go to changes in the social safety net. The first book that I wrote with Jerry was actually about changes shifting from AFDC to TANF. That has made it demonstrably harder for people to pay for college. And things like the current Farm Bill, they're working to make it even harder for people to get on food stamps. Another really serious issue are changes in the labor market. So we hear a lot about how it's not as easy to work your way through college anymore, but that still seems to be about the price. It's not as easy to work your way through college anymore also because there are a lot more people, the third of people who didn't go to college, competing with you for those same jobs. And because the terms and conditions of work are not always fair. So we're having a big discussion in Philadelphia, for example, about shift work. Is anybody here waiting tables in this city? No? Okay, I did that here while I was here too. Good, maybe the stipends have gotten better. That's awesome. So, one of the things that happens to a lot of college students is they have a shift that they have to work, and then that shift changes. And the employer is allowed to do that. And the student, if they say, hey, I have class at that time, is at real risk of losing their job to someone else, right? So that's another aspect of the new economics. And then the last aspect is how the colleges themselves are financed. So for example, you might go to a college expecting that college will sort of make up for what you don't have, at least provide you with an advisor, maybe give you some institutional financial aid. But as we know, most colleges in this country lack the endowments or the flexibility or the state funding to make those things happen. So just to give you, Philly's one of my favorite places to illustrate inequality, right? You all sit at Penn. I think you probably know about the importance of your endowment. Our endowment at Temple is 1/2 of $1 billion, okay? That is about 1/12 of the size of the endowment at my last public institution, UW-Madison, right? So public to public, massive amounts of inequality, and yet Temple educates most of the people in this city who try to get a bachelor's degree, right? So these things together create challenges. So I'm going to be focusing on one of the big challenges, basic needs insecurity. And as I said, there's not a lot of data. It's also not a topic that people have looked at. I mean, until the last probably 6 years, you can search the academic literature and you'll find next to nothing. That does not mean the problem wasn't there. I think that's really important. Right? This idea that sometimes a new research topic becomes hot leads us to believe, and leads reporters to believe, that this is a brand new issue. And we get that question a lot. But as the students have said, the students who've struggled with these challenges for a long time, the researchers have discovered basic needs insecurity in higher education the way Columbus discovered America. Got it? Right. So that's important because we should acknowledge that. We should ask why this topic has gotten so little attention. Most of the interest in this field is not in sociology, okay? It is coming primarily from public health, and it has primarily been focused on food insecurity as a result of the public health interest, much less of it on housing insecurity. It comes up, I mean, I have to admit, there are people like Stephanie DeLuca who have been studying people who live in public housing and have noticed that they have challenges with housing while they're in college. That's a somewhat different angle than asking of the people in college who has challenges with housing. So it's come up in a set of studies, but it hasn't ever sort of been called out as a main area of inquiry. And the work is still at this point very exploratory because it is so young and there are so many unanswered questions. And we think that sometimes it's wrong to move towards interventions and those sorts of things when you don't yet fully understand the problem. But there are some interventions going on. So I'm going to give you an overview and I'm going to raise questions to stimulate more research because I really hope that at least one of you will dive into this. And again, our goal is to solve the problem. I want to be clear that does not mean solving poverty. right? I always have to assure the college leaders of this too. We're not asking people to solve poverty. We do believe that it has to be possible in the United States of America to greatly reduce the number of students who are enduring these issues while in college, and that it is probably possible to do so within a reasonable time frame, like the rest of my professional life, okay? Which is my hope. All right, so the first thing I want to do as I lay out the research agenda is I want to tell you about our approach, and luckily I finally now have a 2-minute quick explainer video to show you about our approach, because it is action driven, and I want you to kind of see what that looks like.
Every day in this country, someone new decides to go to college. They realize that the path to their goals requires at least some education after high school, and they're willing to put in the work. They're talented, they show effort, but 1 in 2 will never get a degree. For more than a decade, my team's been asking why. The answers are coming, but not fast enough. In 2013, I founded the Wisconsin Hope Lab to conduct action research on ways to make college more affordable. Over the first 5 years, we highlighted the cost of living that can make it so hard for students to remain focused on school. We documented a crisis caused by food and housing insecurity and worked to address those issues by improving institutional policy and practice. And we got results. The New York Times and the Washington Post featured our work, as did The Daily Show with Trevor Noah. Our efforts garnered more than $12 million in support, affected 24 pieces of federal and state legislation, produced a best-selling book, and spawned a nonprofit that provides emergency aid to students around the country. But we didn't solve the problem, yet. Students in colleges are still struggling, so we're still working. And we're not going to miss a shot to do even more to help. At the Hope Center for College, Community, and Justice in Philadelphia, we're continuing the work to change public perceptions of today's college students and reshape higher education policy and practice. We are the place where hope has a strategy. In fact, it has 3 parts. First, we develop and evaluate creative approaches to solving challenges of practice, policy, and public perception. Second, we work closely with thinkers and doers to ensure that effective approaches are implemented and scaled. Last, we spur change by igniting a fire to engage others in taking advantage of what we've learned. Impact is our exclusive focus and goal. Please join us in ensuring that every dream of a college degree becomes reality.
Okay, so what that means is that each of the things I'm going to show you next, each of the areas that we've developed as an area of inquiry has been developed in close consultation with the people who would actually need to do the next part, right? The thinkers and doers. And so each time that we design a study, we not only go and ask them, right, like do a focus group, for example, with practitioners, but we usually bring them into the research process. So for example, when we've been trying to look at prevalence, right, prevalence of this problem is a really big issue, and it's a really hard nut to crack because the federal government hasn't gotten involved in asking the right questions. That means the only way for us to really get numbers is to go to colleges and ask them if we can measure this among their students. Now, has anybody tried to field a survey at a college lately? Anybody had that experience? No? In the last 10 years? Okay, it's not fun, right? Colleges and universities are being bombarded with these requests, and they're very concerned about student privacy, and that is not surprising. Even in the last year alone, the higher education rules around FERPA have shifted and gotten a lot more difficult. Anybody who wants to study financial aid is facing a really uphill battle. So if you want to study prevalence, you got to first get the buy-in of these presidents. All right? And we didn't want to just get the buy-in of people who thought they had a problem. In fact, the people who thought they had a problem were really averse to letting this stuff be studied, because what these college presidents figured would happen was that we would have numbers on how many people on their campus were homeless, and we'd put those numbers out there, and they would be asked to do something about that. That's terrifying, especially for presidents who work in the public sector where they're already really under attack. Everybody says that higher ed's not worth it, right? Everybody says that they're not doing their jobs. I mean, there's so many issues for them already. So one of the biggest things that we had to do was get clear about the purpose. Why would you want to understand prevalence? What kind of responsibility does that convey to you? And why might it not cause you a ton of harm to have these numbers out there. We also had to make some big compromises, okay? They were not willing to give us lots of their institutional staff time to make these things happen. That meant, for example, that we could not use their data to construct sampling frames. Not going to happen, all right? We could not take the data that we got and reveal it by school with school name without permission. That's a challenge, okay? We also, by the way, because we couldn't do those things, couldn't garner lots of money from the kinds of places that usually fund this kind of work, like the Gates Foundation, all right? Everybody's going, won't do this. So when we started, we had a budget of 0, and we just decided to kind of repurpose some little bits of money from other grants that we had, cobble together a little bit that we had, and draw our team and ask everybody to work overtime and do our surveys. All right, so over time we started to grow and grow and grow. The first year, 10 community college presidents said yes, 10, 7 states. Okay, we got 4,000 students to respond to our survey. Our response rates, in full disclosure, are usually about 10%. We don't have money to pay them. We don't say anything about housing or food insecurity because we don't want to bias the sample. There are other advocates out there who go to food pantries and set up a table near it and then say, hey, are you food insecure? Come here and do our survey. And then they release a prevalence estimate. I was trained at Penn. I don't do crap like that, okay? It's like not right. So we had to really also think really hard about then how to get students buy-in to something without offering them anything or asking about these things. And so we've designed this sort of approach where we say, look, let's just get real about what's happening in college. Students, you tell us what's going on, right? And so the survey is just, hey, it's your chance to speak out. We give them a sense of empowerment. It appeals to the whole millennial thing, right? We're kind of aligned in that regard. And we open with questions about work, because we found that every undergrad is perfectly willing to be like, yes, I work long hours, I work the graveyard shift, right? We ask them normal types of questions they can readily answer. We bury the food and housing insecurity questions in the middle of the survey, which, as you know, there's some item non-response, and we're going to have some drop-off as people get through the survey, but we still think it's better than putting them right up front, okay? So we have now done multiple studies. Our colleagues at CUNY have done them. Our colleagues in the UC system and the CSU systems in California have done them. Almost by the day, I get a Google Scholar alert of somebody, some dissertation where somebody's measuring this. Yes, sure, please.
So then, what? You still don't have the sampling frame for the place, so within the schools, how are you?
This is a very good question. We're doing a census. We literally send it to all undergrads. Yes. Yeah, this is a really interesting problem, right? We say, the presidents say things like, should we think about a community college? And I'm really lucky that I cut my teeth on higher ed at a community college, like the most complex type of institution actually. They have credit and non-credit students. Right? They have students in all sorts of programs. The president will say, well, do you only want our in-person students? Do you only want our online students? And we'll say, no, we want everybody. Because actually, if you think about it, his graduation rates, ultimately, especially when things are fixed at the federal level, will be based on everybody. And secondly, they want to be able to provide supports to all those students. So the question that the practitioner really wants to know is, what am I dealing with if at the start of an academic year, my goal is to keep them all in school with these sorts of supports? Now, that also means that we survey them in the fall, okay? And we don't survey them right at the beginning. That's a very stressful time. They're bombarded with a lot of stuff. So our goal is to have surveys going out between October and November, depending on if they're a quarter system, you know, all that kind of jazz. And that means that when we ask them questions about the last 30 days, we're asking them about when they're in college. That's also important. It is possible that prevalence rates will go up or down during the school year. One of the things that I've studied a lot of is how financial aid runs out, right, end of term, and maybe things go up. But we also think that, again, they want to staff for services, ideally, that they would have at the start of term. These are all things, though, that need to be worked on. One of the things that's really missing is how prevalence varies over time, right? Another thing that's really missing is, again, what could happen if we got sampling frames and higher response rates, those sorts of things. Okay, so our colleagues at one of the UCs, I can't remember which one, they just released a systematic review that they got published in a public health journal. And they did a look across all the studies that met their criteria. There were about 9 of them. My team had done about half of those. And they concluded that food insecurity was affecting between 40 to 50% of undergraduates. Now, That's probably right for the kinds of institutions that are having surveys, right? Of those surveys that have been done, almost none of them include places like this, and almost none of them include the private and independent colleges. They also tend, though, to not include the for-profits. So if we're thinking about this, we suspect, based on the limited data that we have some of the private and independent schools in our data, that the rates are lower, but not negligible. The rates at places like this they exist. There's certainly some documentation of that, and sociologist Tony Jack at Harvard's doing some good work in that area. But we suspect the rates at the for-profits are higher. In fact, probably even higher than community colleges, because they specifically go and try to draw in impoverished populations that are really interested in the financial aid that they're offering. And yet we know the aid falls short. Okay. The food insecurity has been attacked a lot more than the housing insecurity as a research topic. We also have issues with measurement, which I'll get to on the next slide there. But the rates right at this point look to be similar for housing insecurity as for food insecurity. And then for homelessness, we see lower rates. We measure them over the last year, and we tend to see between 12 to 14% for community college students and around 10%, maybe a little lower for the universities. The report that we released that we're discussing tomorrow, CCP's homelessness rate, Community College of Philadelphia, was 19%. That was exactly what we saw in Los Angeles across their community college district. And at Temple, our homelessness rate over the last year was 7%. This also, the other part of this that's important, we gut check this against the practitioners. So I can tell you that our high-level administration at Temple said, no way, how could that be? And the practitioners all said, yep, that sounds like totally spot on, especially if you're in the bathrooms at the student center or have offices near any publicly accessible restrooms in the morning. Okay, so this is another sort of thing. There's lots of issues. Okay, measurement, we're using the USDA. Has anybody in here used the USDA food insecurity? Okay, it's totally flawed. But we also don't feel like we're in a position to question the USDA measure in our research right now or develop something specific to higher ed, because part of our point is that today's college students are not that different than other regular people. They don't have that much difference in terms of their lives. If anything, though, they might have more trouble paying for food. We know the data is not nationally representative. There is one study that claims to be nationally representative. It comes from the Urban Institute, and it's about food insecurity. All of us, except for them, disagree with the outcomes of their study because theirs is a study of households, not college students. And that's a problem, because if you look at our housing insecurity information, it shows you why you wouldn't want to do a household level survey to capture college students. I've already explained the issues with response rates and with funding. The US GAO, the General Accountability Office, is getting set at the end of this month to release its first ever report on campus food insecurity. It'll be publicly released at the beginning of January, and you should look for it because they took a really hard look at all the existing evidence. And it appears, the word on the street is that they're going to back the numbers that I've just shown you. Okay. Correlates. So we've looked at a couple of different things. I mean, first of all, we want to know by type of institution. I've already told you that we see more at community colleges, but I've also told you that we're missing a really important sector where it's probably higher, which is the for-profits. All of the things that you would expect to see differences by, race, ethnicity, right, income, parental education, immigration status, all of these things, clearly you see higher rates, okay? Some of those things we have to deal with the college presidents on, right? So for example, no, we do not have a good measure of undocumented status. They're terrified for us to ask it. For 2 years, they didn't want us to ask people about their gender pronouns, and they didn't want us to ask about sexual orientation or anything else. We finally are. And it's confirming what has been found in the field of youth homelessness in particular, which is we see great overrepresentation of basic needs issues, and particularly homelessness, among students who are LGBTQ and among students who are gender nonconforming. Okay? There are reasons for that come up in our qualitative interviews. And the number one reason for that is the current financial aid system, which presumes those students have financial support from their families that they usually do not have. So they're falling short and they don't have access. And then there are a number of groups at risk, some of which we can observe in our data, and some quantitative data, and some of which we observe in our qualitative data. The really notable one is the former foster youth. And I'm happy to say that we've been working with the Field Center here. For those of you who are familiar with their Foster Care to College project, we find that almost 25% of former foster youth enrolled in college have experienced homelessness. It very much aligns with the gaps in policies. So for example, if you are a foster youth and you decide to not age out until 21, but you are living at home, let's say, and so, because if you move away to campus, I don't know if you all know this, but if you move away to campus, then you give up your status in foster care because you're not living with the family anymore. So let's say you give that up, and now you live on campus, and campus closes for the break, or for the summer. They have nowhere, right? And that's just completely sort of neglected, both by the financial aid calculations and by the colleges. So that is primarily when that's happening. We clearly don't know what we can't measure, okay? Obvious problem. What are the consequences of basic needs insecurity? Well, they're everything you would expect, and they're everything that we see in K-12. So we see correlations with lower GPAs, certainly correlations with lower rates of class attendance, although that's not measured well in higher ed. We see lower test scores. We have a study coming out where we looked at the relationship between food insecurity and performance on the ACT test. The College Board so far hasn't played ball to let us look at SAT tests, but it seems like even from the beginning of sort of the college-going process, the food insecurity is affecting students. We certainly, when we are controlling in models, and Katie Broughton has really good work on this in her dissertation, when we've got both food and housing insecurity in a model, right, and they are correlated but not that highly, it does seem to be that the housing insecurity is more impactful than the food insecurity on things like retention. That doesn't surprise me in the least, right? I think that the main mechanism how food insecurity affects students is through their cognitive functioning. They're more likely to be asleep in class, right? They're more likely to be getting poorer grades. But just as with youth homelessness, a couple of nights of not having a place to be, or dealing with your landlord or eviction or stuff like that is more likely to be substantially disruptive and probably lead to you leaving school. Also, housing eats up a much bigger chunk of your budget than food does. So that's what we would expect. And we're just getting into issues of social isolation, feeling like you don't belong with your peers, you don't belong on the campus, and issues of mental health. Clearly, those also cut both ways, right? Mental health is causing some of the issues that students are seeing, poor mental health, and poor mental health is the result of students feeling like this and not having what they need. There's only one quasi-experimental design in this space. There's very little. Katie's got the one, and there's one on benefits access. There's very little attention to heterogeneous effects either, right? This is just a wide open space in terms of measurement. Last area, intervention. So this is clearly what we're most interested in. One of the things that I'm very weary of in higher ed are the number of so-called solutions and the number of programs that are being pitched to colleges like they work. So some of you might be familiar with something called guided pathways. Guided pathways is a rethinking of undergraduate education to say students shouldn't have all kinds of choices when they go to college. They should just have a few meta majors to choose from. And they should be shepherded down those paths. Sort of sounds like tracking. It came out as a book from a noted economist at Columbia as a hypothesis, but it's been adopted already all over America and is being funded as an intervention. This affects our work because if we go into the field and we talk about things you can do and we put together sort of a package of solutions, the colleges are looking at us like we're those other folks. Okay, it's a really big problem. So instead, we are currently looking for initiatives that are coming out of the practice, right? Out of the spaces where the colleges already are, and we're testing their interventions, right? So we're looking to see if the things that they already tend to do are working. We have, for example, Section 8 vouchers are now being given out to community college students in Tacoma in a partnership between the college and the Tacoma Housing Authority. We are measuring those effects in an experimental design. It was something they already started. Same thing with food scholarships in Houston. Same thing with meal vouchers in Boston. Same thing with a 60-year-old affordable housing communal living program for college students in Florida. They've been around for ages. It never occurred to them to have a program evaluation. And now we're able to leverage it not only so that we can do the RCT, but also so that we can follow some students around and figure out if you're put all together as low-income students in communal living, how that compares to being in more diverse settings, albeit still as a low-income student in college. These are really big challenges. Some of these challenges, that 60-year-old program is still an anomaly. Most of these programs are only a few years old. There's a really important set of questions to be asked about when programs are ready for randomized evaluation. And a randomized evaluation in a space that is not entirely comfortable with those designs. There's still a real need for a lot of creative thinking about how to assess these programs without randomization. Nonetheless, we're operating in an environment created by the Department of Ed where only the randomized trials are really the ones that will get funding or be listened to in terms of interventions. These studies are all incredibly under-resourced. I have, on the one hand, millions for research studies on techie kind of solutions to college problems. And I have in the low 100,000s resources for studies of things like the Section 8 housing vouchers, right? Where I have to follow around homeless college students year after year and get data from them, which is like torture in terms of staffing and incentive. And then the other part is that the impacts are obviously slow to emerge. That's true for all sorts of studies, but there's not a lot of patience in the field, as you can well imagine. A couple of resources, and then I'll stop for questions. Starting 3 years ago, we began to host an annual conference that includes researchers who are working in this area. Because what we're trying to do as a matter of professional development, not only have you do studies, but do it having known and being in conversation with those practitioners and those students and those policymakers, right? So we just held the third one at Temple a few weeks ago. We had 500 people there, and we're holding the next one in Houston next year in the fall. We do offer travel scholarships, and we'll be back in Philadelphia the next year. We also maintain an annotated bibliography of every single study that we can possibly find on this area of work, and that's on our Hope for College website, and it's being updated as we speak. We do include student theses in that body, so it's not like it's only peer-reviewed published work. We want to see everything that's going on, and we do continue to welcome research partners. That's my contact info, that's our website, and I'm really excited and interested in your questions and your ideas. So, thoughts? Yes?
I have a question about one kind of like the basic needs, and it's around like childcare.
Yes.
Yeah, so like I would want to share like what do you know about that? I just saw a poster the other day around Penn campus that was a student organization that was basically hosting some kind of workshop.
Yeah.
The need that there is for that kind of service and that is not met.
Yeah, it's absolutely unmet. And we know this, right? So a couple of statistics, 1 in 4 college students today has a child. 1 in 4, that's massive. And by the way, it's an undercount because that's the number of college students who have a dependent of their own for official purposes. Lots of other college students have children in their households who they are taking care of, but are not officially dependents. These are younger siblings, cousins, all that sort of thing. As those numbers have grown over time, the resources for child care, especially on campus, have shrunk. It is through a federal program called C Campus, and the estimate is that they have funding to support about 5% of the need nationally. Last year there was a very weird moment where there was excess money in the higher ed budget, and there was a fight over what to do with it. The fight was primarily between Patty Murray and Chuck Schumer. Chuck Schumer wanted to put the money towards public service loan forgiveness, and Patty Murray wanted to put it towards childcare. Patty Murray won. So there's been an increase in funding for C Campus. This is actually a really interesting opportunity for research because there will be some growth in the C Campus programs, and the C Campus programs are not well evaluated. I see this as very intimately tied to housing insecurity issues. Okay, so just to give you one example, one of the problems I'm seeing in the Section 8 study is that we have people who won't utilize their vouchers because the places that they could get would be too far away from their childcare and in relation to their job and their school, right? But there's also no clear solution for that. We're just starting a study of a program in Louisville where they have co-located the childcare and the affordable housing unit together and across the street from the college campus. We strongly suspect that that works, but the question is what's the financial model that gets that going? The good news in their case is that they do have a financial model that is public and private. It does take good advantage of HUD dollars, and it does leverage the university's need for childcare for their staff and faculty, so there's a really nice process of cross subsidies, right? And those, I think, are also important. So I don't think this is going to be just mainly about studies about the impact of childcare. It's going to be studies about what we can do to change people's minds about the need for it, and more importantly, what we can do, what are effective funding models that are sustainable. Yeah, it's a really important one. Yeah?
So I guess there's many young men and women who are having the same issue, but outside of the college, right?
Yes.
Probably more people actually are in food and housing, the insecure probably. But there's also general program not geared for the college students, and also, this college student status sometimes get fuzzy, right? Like some students are not enrolled as a student, then next year they come back, and next year they. So how does that, the working with this status with the students, or working with other programs that are geared for the general public, how does this actually your programs and your, the design, especially for the, the university students or college students, how does that they really work for or against actually the already existing program?
This is a really important set of questions. The first part, let me just say, there's reason to think that prevalence rates among college students might be higher than the Gen Pop, okay? Because some of the conditions that are creating these things are there only for the students, right? So just take an example. If you've got to pay tuition, obviously it exerts a greater strain on your budget. If you're not in college, you don't have that same strain, but you don't have access to financial aid. But what if you're in college and you don't have access to financial aid, right? So we're seeing this lower middle class, for example, that would probably actually be much more able to afford their living expenses if they were not in college, okay? The second thing is that it's interesting that there are programs for the general population that are much harder to access if you're in college. Because and this is why so much of our work is on the public perception of college students, because rules have been designed to exclude college students based on the perception that they are advantaged people with family support. So one example of that goes to housing. Right? A lot of states have rules that exclude college students, and particularly full-time college students, from housing. If you read my book, there's a chapter on Milwaukee, and I describe a woman who's grown up in public housing and is thrown out of public housing because she's enrolled in college full-time. She then decides to not be thrown out. She needs to be able to stay there with her mom, and so she switches to part-time status. This is an oversight, sort of, in a sense, of the Milwaukee Housing Authority, but at the same time, it's a conscious decision around rationing, right? So this is undeserving poor stuff, right? This is classic rationing stuff. This is really interesting. Another example is SNAP. So the way that the rules are written nationally for SNAP, if you're a childless adult and you want to get on food stamps, then you have to work at least 20 hours a week, and college doesn't count as work. Now, Pennsylvania, this past year, activists had a really good year, and they did convince Pennsylvania to change the rules for the technical students in technical programs at the community colleges, so that those programs now do count as work, right? And now those students have more access to SNAP. But as you can see, it is harder to meet a 20-hour-a-week work requirement to get the food stamps if you're also in school, and it's counterproductive because you're less likely to finish college, which would get you off SNAP forever, hopefully, if you could actually complete, but the work you're doing drives you out. The last part is a question about when and these programs are designed, should they be designed to be accessible to the general population as well? This is a really interesting one, and let's take the case of the campus food pantry. Right? So there are now over 700 colleges and universities with campus food pantries. I'm probably one of the few people that is not that excited about that, because food pantries have never solved poverty in any sense. They don't even address food insecurity. What they do is they make people feel really good, right? This is sweet charity, okay? So what it can be good for is galvanizing more advocacy. What it's bad for is that it leaves administrators believing that they have satisfactorily resolved the problem and they do nothing else. But one of the things that they tend to do when they set up a campus food pantry is they require a student ID, excluding the general population. In places like where I sit, and actually where you are too, although probably to a lesser extent, this is bad for university community relations, right? A lot of community members come and spend the day in our student center, And if they see our food pantry, which you can see from downstairs, it's just above the Starbucks, and learn that when they go upstairs, they cannot have access to that food, right? They grow ever more upset with us. At the same time, the food pantry is worried about running out of food, even though there is no shortage of food. And we already use a tight points-based rationing system. So these are questions like where I would hope, for example, that sociologists would help weigh in on what are the right dynamics to create there, what is beneficial. I tend to think that programs that are more universal, right, that include more folks, tend to have more stakeholders that help to keep the program alive. At the same time that there's a differential view of whether you're deserving of free food based on whether or not you are a status as a college student. Yeah. Yes, hi.
No, very interesting. I'm curious, you mentioned in passing that it's not a good idea to study college students through household surveys.
Yes.
And I wanna understand why, because sometimes I think that to answer Hume June's question, like how much this is produced by college or comes from somewhere else, maybe having the household and kids in college. So I wonder if you can elaborate.
Yeah.
I don't know where I heard this at Penn.
So it's from Urban.
Oh.
Yeah, this is the Urban study that has that.
Because at Penn, for instance, they were talking about low-income students.
Okay.
One of the problems they face is that even though they give them enough stipend, they have to share the stipend with the household.
Yes, thank you. Yes, that is absolutely true. And that's a whole other area of our work on what we're calling the financial reciprocity with the household, right? And this is from my training from Kathy Eden, frankly, right? We've written a lot about this. It's a big deal. But they don't fit well into households. And when those households are called and asked about the status of the people in their households, a lot of these college students have no contact.
Or they're not members of the household.
Yeah.
They don't get listed as household members.
Well, they might be listed, but the information that's provided is not good information, right? There's multiple reasons. We've written up a piece about explaining all the 5 main reasons why, given the habits of today's students, we just don't think that they are, and they're much less likely also to answer the phone or be responsive to those surveys as well. But for example, what Urban had said was, well, this works because we call the household, we talk to mom. Mom says, here's my college student, and my college student isn't food insecure. Okay, well. I can't tell you how many moms I know who don't know that their kids are food insecure in college, right? In fact, part of the dynamic is this lower middle class thing where the student is food insecure and will never tell that to the parent. Janice, you look like you're going to jump in. No? Okay.
I do have a question. But
sure. Oh, okay, sorry. So that's the main concern there. I mean, the one advantage of, let's say it's an underestimate, right? One of the ways the Urban approach this is, well, let's go ahead and maybe it is an underestimate, but can we look at change over time because we use the household surveys? And they certainly did see, for example, what we would expect, which is around the recession, the numbers were higher and they've gone off a bit. But I also would say that some of the ways in which the aftermath of the recession has played out for the middle class would lead me to think that post-recession, those students would be more likely to be missed by those household surveys, right? If the dynamic that I just explained is there. So we've got students who send money home all the time to their families who would never disclose, right, their actual sort of health status in this way. It's very much a hidden thing. It's very stigmatized. So that's my sense of it. Yeah.
So there's a little. This was wonderful.
Okay, thank you, Janice.
But I'm a little confused.
Sure.
But you sort of start off saying for middle-income people, college education doesn't seem to have the returns it used to have. I'm a little surprised by that.
Yep.
Because everything I've seen is that the returns to education have gone up. I've not looked at this in a year, so maybe it's old.
Yep.
And if you measure it correctly, which is not what the rich guys are making, but what you make with the college versus what you make
the counterfactual.
with the college.
Yep.
I thought that has been expanding for the last.
So let me clarify. First, I'm not saying the returns aren't there. I'm saying they're going to be less likely to get the returns because their ability to finish and the types of schools they're going to is changing. Okay, right? So one of the challenges with the returns literature is we do tend to see averages. Sometimes it's disaggregated, but it's also based on the sort of current composition of where people go to school, right? So let's say that most of those returns are generated by people going to reasonably good schools, right? And let's say that overall school quality has been eroding or shifting, right? And particularly by family income. We would expect to see those things change. And those latest numbers have not been there. But again, I'm not talking about whether the economic return, which I totally agree should be measured relative to their own counterfactual, has changed. I'm talking about whether the pricing and the odds of attendance and degree completion for the middle class are going to start looking like the rates that we saw of the class below them, right? While the folks at the top are pulling ahead in that race. Those are totally different things. I mean, they're related though, right? The other piece of this that's really important about the returns piece is, so one thing I'm always talking to my students about is how the returns to college is also a political device, right? So the returns to college, and whatever those returns are, and the idea the returns are still good, has a use politically. It is used to justify the loans. Right? We cannot prop up a loan system and this approach if we don't believe the returns are there and that the returns are primarily private. So I think that makes the precision of the estimation of those returns and the sort of updating of our understanding of those returns really, really important. I also think that far more research is needed on the private versus the social returns to education. There's some more literature out there than there has been in the past, but not nearly what there needs to be, because it is the fundamental basis of the financing system as we now see it. Yeah?
I have a question.
Sure.
So you mentioned perception, and you mentioned that a third of the staff at your center are comms people.
Yes.
And also your research campaigns.
Yes.
Can you talk a little bit more about like your communications efforts?
Yeah, I mean, the biggest, most important part of our communications efforts is that we see these as two-way streets, right? So I think that a lot of researchers have, for the longest time, thought about communications as straight-up dissemination. Like, I have information, and you, the public, you need my information, right? You are not well informed without my information. We don't see that as particularly productive, right, or effective. And so we're trying to create communications channels where there is a conversation, to say the least, and at best, the communication flows to us as well so that it can be part of the feedback loop. We don't know all yet what that means, but it means, for example, social media is a lot more interactive as a communications channel, right, than a bunch of press releases. So we spend our day-to-day primarily on social media and much less on that old sort of approach. It also means that we're trying to give the people who are very good at changing the research agenda, people like the folks that in qualitative interviews we would interview, right, to actually give them a platform on our space, right, with our resources, so that they are heard directly. This is actually much harder, easier said than done. Helping students to be able to speak out without taking advantage of people and making sure that they're actually equipped to be able to give voice to their challenges without being essentially re-victimized. Take a homeless college student, right, and ask them to tell their story to powerful people. It's not an easy thing to do, but it's absolutely important. And we then will take those same students, for example, at our conference and put them into direct conversation with the researchers so that they can hear it as they inform their agenda. My hope then is that the efforts that we would make with our wealth of expertise and our PhDs would then be directed towards the things where the problems are that really need to be solved. And they would be designed in ways that are actually aligned and better able to actually address those challenges. Does that make sense? I'm not our comms director, obviously.
Sara, very illuminating, very
Good. Thank you for having me. I appreciate it. Yeah.